Chapter 9 The Man in the Alley. Philo woke the next morning with the good feeling that something special had happened, although it was some moments before he could imagine what. Then he remembered Hylas and turned over so that he could look at him, still asleep so close in the other bed. All he could see in the half-light was the top of a dark head and an arm thrown out. The rope scars still made a faint bracelet around his wrist. Then he tried to imagine how the room would be without Hylas. He had assured them the evening before that he had no plans yet to leave Philadelphia. Indeed, he was not yet strong enough to make the journey, but the moment would come one day. Philo pushed the thought to the back of his mind. That morning the sun had warmth in it for the first time. When the spring rains came, the steep streets of Philadelphia would turn into muddy streams, and all the shutters would bang. But for the moment the clouds were high. On the surface nothing seemed to have been changed by what had happened. Conan went out to the stone yard. Lucia was sitting mending a tunic that Hylas had pulled his table near the door, and continued with his copying. Only Philo felt different. Fulvius, the mess steward, who saw to the main running of the house, noticed Philo's good spirits and realized that he was likely to prove a nuisance indoors and not to be trusted with the unpacking of the new tableware. He was a Syrian, even darker than the tribune, a small, wiry man with a passion for fixing things. He was equally good at mending a couch leg and finding figs in the city where there were none to be had. At first Philo had been uncertain whether he could trust him, for Fulvius had been exasperated by the boy's clumsiness, but after he saw that Philo was at least willing, they got on better. "Spices," said Fulvius. "You of anyone ought to know where we can best get those, and I'm told there is no saffron left in the city. See what you can do, only don't pay a silly price. No need to hurry yourself." Philo gave him a grateful look and was out of sight before Fulvius could think of further errands that might have meant carrying a heavy basket. He knew just where to go, not to the stalls in the market square, but to the warehouse of Paulinus. If there was any saffron to be had, Gorion the scribe would know where it was. It was a long time since he had pushed down the narrow alley past donkeys waiting to be unloaded and dark mule boys speaking all the dialects from Arabia to Antioch. He had been keeping away from the part of the city that reminded him of his father. Today he felt different, ready to be back in this small world of smells and colors and gossip about people and prices. Gorion was an elderly Jew, one of the few still working in the city who had survived the riots. He worked as a clerk in Paulinus' warehouse, and Philo hoped that it would be possible to talk to him without meeting the merchant. He was never likely to forgive Paulinus for the way he had spoken in the market square on the morning when news of Apollodorus' death had reached Philadelphia. If it meant waiting for a good moment, he was not in a hurry. There was so much to see. He had been standing for some time in a convenient corner where he would not be bumped by the donkeys passing with loads that almost filled the narrow alley, when he had the feeling that he was being watched. In all that crowd and noise it seemed fanciful, but Philo turned all the same to peer under the dim archways further up the hill. It seemed to him that a dark young man drew back at the moment into a doorway. Philo saw only the back of his head and the set of his shoulders, but there was something familiar about him. He turned away, pretending to have noticed nothing, and then glanced back quickly. The man was still there, and this time, despite an unfamiliar beard, Philo knew him. Nicanor had not changed much. Without stopping to think that his brother might not want to be recognized, Philo ran down the alley. Nicanor seemed to hesitate, and before he had time to disappear, Philo had him by the arm. "Not here," hissed Nicanor, seeing the tears in his brother's eyes and the probability of a noisy and conspicuous greeting. He pulled Philo back through the doorway and into the dim spaces of a warehouse stacked with bundles of hides. It was dark and the smell was terrible, but suddenly quiet after the racket of the alley outside. Philo held on to his brother by both arms and looked up at him. Of course he had known Nicanor, but now he was wondering how. The beard was young and silky, not much more than a beginning, but the hair had grown shaggy and the eyes seemed more deeply set. The lines around the mouth were different too. "Why haven't you been back?" There seemed to be no place for the normal greetings and exchange of news. "Did you really expect me, with them in the house?" "But Lucia—" "I know. You aren't the only one who loves her. If I ever came, it would be to see her. I suppose I will some day, but not yet. Don't look like that, Philo. I'm glad to see you, but not Conan. The Romans were his idea." "Not really. It was me, and Hylas, too." "Who's Hylas?" The strange name brought a flicker of interest to the dark, preoccupied eyes. Philo explained. Nicanor leant back against a pile of bales, his face almost hidden in the gloom. When Philo finished, there was a moment's silence. Then, when he spoke again, Nicanor's voice was different, not so defensive. Then I suppose he'd understand. I wish I'd known. It would have been a help. Now listen, I haven't got long. Cousin Charles is expecting me back at the farm before midday. Yes, I'm still here, but not for much longer, though he doesn't know that. One day he'll come puffing into the city to find out where I've gone, and you are not to tell him what I'm going to tell you now. Do you understand? Philo nodded, uncomprehendingly. It's like this. I've had time since I left home to sort things out in my own mind. I don't think I quite knew what I was doing when I went off. I do now. You know what Lucia told us about being a Jew, the way it comes from the mother? I've thought a lot about that because I came to see if it was true. I didn't have to stay in Philadelphia and be my father's son and keep out of trouble with the Romans. I know how father saw things, but he's dead and I'm alive and things have changed. There are still Jews in the city. You know that? I went to them. There's more, far more to it than I ever imagined, and the time's far too short to learn properly. But any time now the war will start again, and I know it's my war and I want to be part of it, and I know on which side. But you aren't a Jew. You can't be, wailed Philo in horror. Nicanor shook him to make him quiet. In what matters I am. I've been accepted. I go south any day. But you haven't been circumcised. No. Philo backed away and winced instinctively. With pain and dismay he knew now, finally, that Nicanor meant what he said. It was as if he was no longer his brother, but some unfamiliar Jewish zealot. South? Where are you going? Not to Jerusalem? No, Machaerus. There's still some hope of holding out there, of saving something. They can't kill us all. Could they not? Philo remembered his own tribune, Marius Gallienus, easy-going enough mostly, but at the bottom tough as steel. It sounded as if Nicanor was trying to persuade himself. Did Gordian help you in all this? He asked, suddenly suspicious. No, I tried him first, but he would have nothing to do with it. I don't know why. Oh, Philo, I'm glad I saw you, but it does make things even more difficult. Philo wanted to take his brother's hand and go out into the sunshine together on some errand for their father as they had done when they were small, with home there to come back to, and the next day just the same. But father was dead, and they would never walk up the hill from the market and in the front gate together again. He took a step back from his brother. I could hate you, Nicanor, because we were unhappy enough, and now you've made things worse, but I won't. You're hating, and I don't think it helps at all. Hylas doesn't, and he has even more reason than you have. Look what the Romans have done to him, and all they did to you was kill a horse, and yet he can live quietly in the same house as the Romans, and I must too. I won't hate people I don't even know and understand. Later I may, but not for the moment. Philo, you're only being childish. I'm a man now. Things are different for me. Look, I can't bear this. I've got to go. Nico, don't forget us. You've changed yourself. You've thrown away everything. We'll still be here. We won't forget you. Nicanor took his brother by the shoulders with hands that trembled, kissed him quickly, and ran out the doorway. Philo stayed where he was for some time, remembering the unfamiliar touch of his brother's beard, the hard man's hands. Then he went quietly out into the alley, found Gordian, and did the errand he had been sent to do. When he had finished, he did not go straight home. It seemed days since he had left his house so happily, but it was still only mid-morning. Somehow he could not face the direct way home from the market. Without really thinking about it, he found himself in the square by the temple. He paused, half wanting to go to his usual watch-place on the city wall to try to sort out the turmoil in his mind, but he had not been there since his father's death. Instead, he went through the gate into the stonemason's yard in search of Conan. He would have to hear about Nicanor sometime, and it might be easier at once and away from the house. Conan could see from his brother's face that something serious had happened. He took Philo out of sight behind a stack of unshaped stone and listened quietly to all he had to say. When it was over, he stood looking down at his own dusty hands with the grazes and cuts from the stone worker's tools. Well, at least Nicanor has decided something and gone through with it. That's more than I have, he said quietly, and you've got a job too. What could you have done? Not something like that. And Philo was beginning to wonder about his own work. It was not likely to last very long as things were now. Perhaps not, but I can't stay here. It's no good. I like the carving, but not here, not in Philadelphia. It's too small. There's Jason. Oh, just too much to remind me. Go home now, Philo. Try not to worry. There's nothing you anyway can do about all this. Suddenly, he gave his brother a quick hug. Thank the gods for someone who doesn't change. Philo was so surprised that he left the yard speechless. It seemed better to Lucia nothing of what had happened. In the last months she had aged a great deal, and was often in pain with her stiff knees. That night they told Hylas, but there was nothing left that anyone could do except wait. It was on one of the first really wet days towards the end of the month, when Conan had not gone up to the stone yard, that he had talked with Fulvius. He had wandered across the tables, trying to keep out of Hylas's way in the cramped room, and the steward found him there. Well, it won't be long now, he said. I understand Sosthenes will be in the city any day as soon as the road's passable, and then you'll be off. Those biceps are strong enough to carry a shield. What shield? Conan was at a loss. Why, I took it for granted that was all you were waiting for. What else can you do? You can't sit around here all your life. Enlist, of course. Where else can you be sure of a job with a pension at the end? Conan almost laughed, but managed to turn it into an expression of amazement. In the Legion? But I'm not a citizen. Did I say the Legion? Though there are worse places to be. What about the auxiliaries? Vespasian started the war with at least 20,000. Sosthenes will be recruiting for the foot auxiliaries. It's not a bad life. 25 years service, and then the citizenship is a bonus. 25 years, said Conan. The whole idea was absurd. If he lived that long, he would be over 40. Fulvius cocked an eyebrow at him and understood very well what was going on in the boy's head. He had only said what seemed obvious. He had nothing to gain by pushing Conan except another chance of proving his reputation as one who saw further than most. Hylas noticed the preoccupied look, wondered what was on his mind, and decided not to ask. Conan would tell him later. There was no one else he could talk about to things that would have worried Lucia and perplexed Philo. The younger boy was growing up quickly, but he had his own problems. That, unfortunately, was the night when Marius Galenus struck Philo, and not without some justification. Officers from the 5th Legion were passing through, and the tribune was only too glad of the chance for a party. Fulvius had ordered something special, and the guests had put on their best tunics. For Philo, the evening started badly. A chilly wind was blowing down from the citadel into the courtyard, so that as the servants hurried backward and forward, their hands were alternately hot and cold. That was why Philo dropped the cup, one of the best ones. Fulvius cuffed him, not very hard, and said that he would sort it out in the morning, but the boy was already tense and frightened when he began to wait at the table. Somehow the room seemed even noisier than usual, and the smell of wine stronger. Galenus never got more than flushed when he drank, but not all the visitors were so lucky. Suddenly, Philo hated them, hated Rome and the emperor and the endless war that in its own way had reached out and harmed his family. All that Nicanor had said seemed true. Most of all, he hated standing in a blue tunic filling drinking cups and mopping up greasy tables. He wished he was out of it all with Nicanor, out of the sound of all Romans. Then one of the visitors, a fat young man, noticed the look on his face. What's the matter then, Brown Eyes? Don't you like it here? Don't you like me? Philo, who had just brought him a damp towel to wipe his sweating face, stood frozen. Nothing in Fulvius's training so far had taught him what to do now. A nice-looking boy like you, whose friend are you, I wonder? The man patted Philo on his bare leg, and the boy shied like a startled horse and bumped into the table by the tribune's couch. The wine from his cup slopped over and splashed the breast of his white tunic. "Idiot," said the tribune. "Come here." It was only 3 steps, but all the strangers were jeering by now. Galenus's eyes were very bright. He slapped Philo hard across the face and said, "Now get out." The laughter followed him into the cold courtyard. As he stumbled over the steps, eyes blinded by tears, a hand caught his shoulder. "Go to the kitchen. Wait there." It was Fulvius, using the sort of voice one did not disobey. Without it, Philo would have gone straight over to the back wall without a cloak and run till he was lost, as Fulvius well knew. As it was, he spent the next hour huddled on a stool in the corner of the kitchen, trying to keep from under the cook's feet, and hoping he would have died before Fulvius came and punished him again. He had never felt so helpless in his life. It was very late when Fulvius did come. Philo got up, clumsy with exhaustion, and stood, a hand to his bruised cheek. Fulvius turned him toward the lamp. That will show by morning. I don't think we're going to make a dining-room servant of you, so we shall have to think of something else. No, don't look like that. Didn't you see the tribune was only trying to get you out of harm's way before that fat man started to maul you about? If our Marius had been in earnest, you'd have lost your front teeth. Now go to bed and we'll sort it out in the morning." Philo started to go and then turned back irresolute, nearer to tears now that Fulvius had been kind, and not yet able to believe that this was all that was going to happen. "What's the matter? Oh, I see. Don't imagine anyone's going to waste a good flogging on you tomorrow. We've got better ways of wearing ourselves out. Now do as you're told and go to sleep." Philo went. As he slid down in the bed, Conan grunted in protest at the cold air, and then laid an arm across his chest. Then the room was quiet again, but it was much later before Philo slept.